Our attention now to the state of our union. Stock market's doing great thanks to the Fed money printing, but around 1 in every 10 workers by the government's count is unemployed. And if you add underemployment or those not counted, it rises to 1 out of every 6 Americans. So how do you have financial prosperity at the expense of American employment? 1.4 million workers have been unemployed for 99 weeks or more. Many of their jobs will never come back. More than that, it feels as if America has lost its purpose. Where are the jobs? And what are those jobs to do? Where is the innovation in our economy? Why aren't we addressing a major crusade for energy independence? Addressing a major crusade to provide effective, cost-efficient health care? Well, we're, of course, looking for solutions to these problems, launching the second leg of our Steel on Wheels tour starting tomorrow at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. But today we're discussing the jobs and innovations crisis that prevails in this country with Scott Paul, Executive Director for the Alliance for American Manufacturing, also joined by Richard Florida, an expert on cities and innovation and author of The Great Reset. And I should point out, these two men come at this problem from a very different place. One from the point of view of the robust act and the manufacturing core of this country, and the other looking at the ways to harness all of the modern technology and all of the modern interconnectedness to create new jobs, both of which obviously incredibly vital to taking this country forward. And I'm going to begin with you, Richard, and the book, The Great Reset. What is the point of that book?
Well, you know, this crisis we're going through is a once-in-a-century event. We've been through 2 other big ones before, the Great Depression, of course, and the big crisis of the late 19th century. And what we know in these crises is, even though they're long-term events, and literally 2 or 3 decades, a generation, they are periods of massive innovation and massive business formation. We got to get back to that, and you're absolutely right, Dylan. The key that we have to do is begin to stoke that job engine that has been faltering for far too long. And
the problem, though, is that there's so many businesses right now that are threatened by the very innovation that you're advocating for, Richard. The healthcare systems, I got out at the Mayo Clinic over the past couple of days. The way they do it is very disruptive to the way it is done in the fee-for-service business. If you look at what is possible in terms of energy generation and what a threat that is, if you look at what is possible in terms of financial systems and lending and investment, that's incredibly threatening to very powerful profit centers that really supply our political donations, which seems very similar to the railroads and the banks in the 1890s that ultimately led to Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, is that the right context for this?
Well, absolutely. And, you know, Joseph Schumpeter a long time ago told us these periods of reset and recession are periods of creative destruction. They destroy a lot of things to set the economy anew. But, yeah, we have to break the stranglehold of financial elites and other elites who are controlling our country, and we've got to get back to the basics of building a real economy, not a financial economy, a real economy around talented people, around smart investment, around innovation, and around job creation. That's what has to be the topic of the State of the Union tonight and going forward.
And no one has been a bigger victim as a group than the manufacturing base in this country, which simply can't compete with a lot of both the slave labor aspects that are used in manufacturing overseas and a deliberately rigged currency. Scott, give us a sense of what you see as the greatest core leverage that we have and that we can generate with the Steel on Wheels tour, and that we can generate with our collective efforts, yours, mine, Richard Florida, and the millions of people that share our values, just to bring back fairness to the manufacturing business.
Sure. Well, I think one key thing we all have to do is dispel this false notion that we can innovate in this country but make things in other countries, that we don't want those jobs. And I think the sad truth of it is, and we've had about a 20-year experiment in this, is that when the production goes, the innovation soon follows. And let's look at the results. I mean, you've talked about the hollowed-out manufacturing base. We've lost 5 million jobs, 50,000 factories over the last decade. But consider this as well. China now has the world's fastest supercomputer. We don't. China will file more patents this coming year than either Japan or the United States. In fact, China may overtake the United States this year in terms of manufacturing output. And we are importing technology to build our car batteries, our wind turbines, our solar panels, when we invented the first generation of this technology in the 1970s. And it's precisely because we don't have a manufacturing strategy. The one thing that I hope we can all learn is that how interconnected innovation and production are in the United States, the importance of public investment, and the importance of supporting basic science and that lab structure we had that gave us the wonderful things like the internet, the GPS, things we take for granted today. I mean, there's no guarantee that the next best thing is going to come from an American lab or be made in an American factory.
The central policy, Richard, you see as the core to driving a culture of innovation in every city and town in this country.
Well, I want to go back to something Scott said. You know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I wrote a book called The Breakthrough Illusion, Why America Makes the Breakthroughs but Doesn't Follow Through. And he's absolutely right. As we focused on innovation, we've lost manufacturing. We only have about 10% of our workforce today in direct production. But here's what we got to do in cities and towns all over this country. We have 60 million plus Americans who are toiling in low-wage, horrible service jobs.
Crappy jobs,
working in big box stores, taking care of our children, taking care of our ailing parents. As a country, we have to make those jobs good jobs. You know, my dad had a job in the Depression in a factory making eyeglasses. He went off to the war. It took 9 people before he left for the war in the Depression to make one family wage. He came back from the war and he had a good job. We made factory jobs good jobs. We have to make those 60 million service jobs, low-wage, crappy jobs, good jobs. And I hope to God President Obama focuses on that tonight.
If you were to look at the compulsion to do this, the strength in our economy, and the only barrier to it, Scott, really being certain manufacturing interests that are basically long the China construct and very powerful financial interests that would be very disrupted by the compulsion, whether it's through tax policy or other mechanisms, to drive capital into long-term and intermediate-term investment in ideas, in entrepreneurship, in factories, as opposed to the constant short-term sort of paper pushing that goes on in New York right now. How do you break the stranglehold of the financial community and certain trade interests that would be necessary to release the cascade that the two of you are talking about?
Well, if you can figure that out, you've got the Rosetta Stone, Dylan, but we can make some progress, and here's how. We have to change the incentives, and we can do that in 2 ways, and you've talked about this. We have to take on China's mercantilism. We have to be much more aggressive about that. At the same time, we have to get our own house in order, and when we are spending public money, it needs to be focused on innovation, education, research and development, building out our infrastructure, investing in our workforce for these productive jobs and these innovative jobs. And we really have to break this notion that our future is in the knowledge economy or in financial services alone. We've tried that, didn't work out so well. We need a strong manufacturing base. We need to grow it. Things will grow out of that, like innovation.
Richard, very quickly, how do you break the stranglehold, man?
Well, I think you go back to what's happening in the cities and the states. The mayors, the governors, the leaders at our state economies have to grow those economies. They're investing in manufacturing. They're investing in innovation. They're hooking up design and innovation to manufacturing. They're partnering American companies. They've encouraged some foreign investment. They've upgraded supply chains. I think our president has to lead here, and he has to make the case, as Scott said, for innovation, for production, for updating jobs. You know, we have to get away from the distractions. We've done healthcare. We've done the other things. We've got to get on track and build a narrative about a strong and vibrant and innovative America that creates good jobs. If the president can set that table tonight, I think over the next 4 or 5 years, we can begin the process. But we need a new strategy for innovation, for economic competitiveness and jobs. There's no doubt about it.
And then let us all be proud of what we do as we do it, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Richard Florida, the book, The Great Reset. Scott Paul, Executive Director of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Thanks to both of you guys. I really appreciate it. And as I mentioned,
thank you, Dylan.